We'll get started. So today I'm joined by Katie, and Katie's going to talk to us about wellbeing. Katie, you'll know from her online presence, and you'll know her probably from her mental health first aid courses, which I know go down an absolute treat with anyone who's been on them. So thank you for joining us today, Katie.
My pleasure. It's great to be here and chat with you.
Brilliant. So you've said previously, you and I have said previously, should I say, that wellbeing's beyond that basket in the staff canteen, in the staff office. What do you see providers doing to support their staff wellbeing? Really, what really good things have you seen?
Well, I suppose the first thing really is to get clear on is what wellbeing means. So there are so many different definitions, but the one that I talk about the most, which is one of the easiest to remember and understand, is ultimately how happy, healthy and comfortable we are. And so I ask people to think about that both personally and professionally. So when we relate it then to the workplace, I ask people to think about how happy, healthy and comfortable are you at work. And as you mentioned, wellbeing baskets, when we saw wellbeing being introduced in the Education Inspection Framework back in September, what we saw was an influx of people trying to very quickly tick off wellbeing and to be able to say that they had now done something to support staff wellbeing. But ultimately, it's not just one-off gestures, it's everyday practice. How staff are supported, it's working towards the term that I use, which is a mentally healthy workplace culture. So, it's how well you support staff wellbeing right from the very beginning. So from induction, right the way through. And I think one of the things that the new Education Inspection Framework talks about as well is what is it like to be a child in this setting? And I always ask managers and leaders to consider what is it like to be a member of staff in this setting and think about it from that perspective, because times are changing. We've always been and of course it's very important, we're there to do a job, and that job is to nurture children, safeguard them, protect them and provide them with high quality care. But in order to be able to do that job properly, we need to be healthy and well ourselves. So actually starting to think about why we choose to work in the setting that we work in. What is it about that setting that is right for us? It's got to be that right fit between the owners, the leaders, the management team and the staff, and working together on that shared vision. So I think wellbeing is absolutely at the heart of your setting. It's every action you do every single day. So how well you're treated and taken care of. And so that's part and parcel of everything that we do all the time. And I think it's really it's so simple as to remember that staff that are treated well and taken care of well will always want to do more. It's going back to what your core beliefs and values are. And I think sometimes we chase our tail in early years, we can do anyway, by trying to show that we're committed, outstanding professionals providing high quality care, and we are going back and forth between what our philosophy and vision is for the children in our care. And actually, if as a team we've decided what our core values and beliefs are, then we know what is expected of us every single day and why this is the right one for us.
No, I think that's very true. And happy staff equal happy parents equal happy children. So it's so worth the time and the trouble that it takes to do it and do it well. In your journeys in social media land over the last 5 and 6 weeks, what have you seen employers do to promote staff wellbeing during this pandemic, for those that are obviously still working and those that have perhaps been furloughed? What have you seen that's really took your imagination?
Well, I've seen all sorts of things. I think we can say we've all seen all sorts of different things, but I suppose those settings that had all those had already identified and are really clear on what their core values and beliefs are, and how well they treat staff, those are the settings that are in that best possible position now, because they've already developed that culture where they treat one another with respect, with dignity, and they value one another. So I think we'll all remember after this is finished how we were treated by our employers or the people that we work with. I mean, you and I are both self-employed, but we obviously work with lots of different people. But, you know, as an employee, you will remember how you were treated, how you were respected and taken care of, and those little actions that they did. But I think it also works both ways as well. When the dust settles, staff will also look back on how they responded to their line managers and how well they were supportive. It works both ways. And I think some of the things that perhaps that I've seen is, I was talking to someone the other day, and I don't know how else to describe this, but when you have a baby, say you're a size 16, and after you have the baby, you imagine all of a sudden you're going to be a size 10.
Because it was all baby, Katie, wasn't it?
Yeah. But do you know that analogy, that whole thing? And actually, after the baby comes, you're probably not even a 16 anymore, never mind a 10. And so some settings who had challenges before this happened, who had wellbeing issues, who had staff that maybe weren't happy, or had managers who weren't happy with their staff, this may exacerbate some of those issues and make it tricky. And so what you see sometimes then is resentment, which has already been there. It's now exacerbated at this circumstance, and staff, managers as well, they're becoming really demoralised with one another because they're not reciprocating or responding in a way that they hoped that they would. And actually, at the moment, every single one of us is just trying our best to get through this situation. So we can't put unnecessary pressure on ourselves.
No, not at all.
We can't feel upset or feel resentment because someone hasn't responded in a way that we perhaps thought they might. So it isn't the time to, I think, put extra pressure or burden or expectation. It is the time to be able to support one another, be able to check in with one another, and it all depends, because some settings are still having to work. There are so many different circumstances that people are trying to navigate their way through. But I think those settings that had those values and core beliefs and were treating each other well, and had those clear, open and honest communication. So staff know where they stand and know what's expected of them, so they respond accordingly. I think those are the settings that are perhaps feeling well supported through this process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was speaking to a nursery owner last week who was going to have a coffee morning on Zoom with her furloughed staff, I think that the same day. And she would never have thought of a coffee morning, would you? But, it was that idea of we're all going to have a cup of coffee together, maybe some of us will have a biscuit, maybe not. And we're going to have just a chat like we would do face to face if we were together. For myself personally, WhatsApp has been a revelation. I think I came off a call last night and there was 19 WhatsApp messages flinging backwards and forwards, and we're only a tiny team, but the team are using WhatsApp to share funnies, and sometimes it's the little funnies that we see that may lift someone's afternoon, or nice for them to receive. And staff who are doing that, and people who are doing that for their staff, I think they are promoting wellbeing, even though we're in such unusual times.
Absolutely. And I think it's such a tricky time, isn't it? And so any way that you can connect with one another is useful and necessary. It's gentle, isn't it? It's when you need it. It's being able to open up those lines of communication
and keep them open. Yeah.
And that it's a safe space to be okay, to not be okay, to share how kind of they're feeling, and just have those kind of lines of communication open. I'm seeing lots of we're so good at putting pressure on ourselves, just in the society, the culture that we live in, and we do that without even realising we're doing it. So like yesterday, we had our first really rainy day, didn't we, since we've been in lockdown. So many people yesterday felt they had permission to not do anything. They could have a duvet day or watch a film without feeling guilty, because we all feel like we have to be productive. And we use social media sometimes as a way of, we see what other people are doing, and without realising it makes us feel bad for the stuff that we're not doing. But seeing lots of leaders, managers and owners saying, right, this is the time for me to, rewrite my handbook, come up with our policies. And actually, I feel like this is the time to reconnect with your staff, re-establish those relationships, and actually don't rewrite your handbook without asking staff what they do with the children. think about your philosophy, your vision, because that's what a lot of people are thinking about right now, and restarting and redrawing all these things, but they're doing it without staff. And my worry is that what will happen is some managers and leaders are going to be springing back to work with all these new ideas and plans that they've worked really, really hard on. And actually, when the time comes for going back to work, it's actually going to be a challenge for all of us for all sorts of types of reasons, whether we've got our own children, whether it's other people's children we're taking care of and navigating tricky situations. So we have to tread carefully with all these wonderful new ideas, which will be helpful, but maybe a little bit longer down the road if you want to do them to keep productive, because that's what you need to do to make yourself feel healthy, because that's someone's coping mechanism, and that's great. But just be wary of the pressure that you put on yourself and other people without realizing it, I think.
I think you raise a valid point, because lots of managers will be doing things in isolation. They may be the only one working, or they may have been unable to furlough themselves. So they're sat at home having all these great, wonderful things. But if they were in work, they'd be talking to their deputies, they'd be talking to their managers, they'd be talking to their staff. And they're not doing that now. So as you say, they come back with, look at what I've achieved whilst while we've been closed. Now here you go, have all of this, and the staff members swamped. So you raise a good point. How worried are you that some owners have neglected their own well-being during all of this pandemic?
I'm always worried about that fact. That is something that I see all of the time with the different settings and owners, leaders, managers, practitioners that I work with. We seem to live in a world where we think we're invincible. And I think, if anything, this current situation is teaching us all a really important lesson, that there is nothing more important than our health. And if we haven't got our health, then we can't do anything at all. And unfortunately, because of the current situation on lockdown, we're blurring the lines even more between working hours, working days, if that makes sense. So I really try to pride myself on not responding to emails at the weekend, out of hours. I try to practice what I preach ultimately. And I'm noticing that actually, you know, the days they just stretch out, they're so long. So you think, oh, it's okay to send another message. Or I was speaking to someone this morning and they said they're actually FaceTimed on Facebook by a parent the other day because I had a question for them. So I think in some ways it's creating even more of a kind of a blur of work-life balance. But I really also think this can be an opportunity to redraw those lines and understand what our boundaries are, because actually, as we've already said, in order to be able to do our role effectively, we need to be healthy and we need to be well. And it's hard when you're exhausted. There's never, ever enough hours in the day. If you start to take work home, if you cross those lines, if you're sending emails and you're constantly available, because actually by setting those expectations for yourself, that's what you're saying you're expecting for your team. And so you are, without realizing it, reinforcing all of these bad behaviors, for want of another word. And, you know, the biggest way to, you know, to take care of yourself and your team and safeguard your business right now is take care of your health. And if we're exhausted, then we're not going to be ultimately, in the long run, we're not going to be doing the best that we can do, because we'll have less patience, we'll feel resentful, we'll be you know, we'll be just irritable, and it's a vicious cycle. And what happens is, at the moment, is, I mean, I talk a lot about stress and how stress, we've accepted that stress is part of our everyday life, but if we don't address stress, then it will affect not just physical health but mental health as well, and it leads to anxiety, depression, fatigue, insomnia, migraines, all sorts of different health issues. But we're also now under pressure. We're not just under stress, we're under pressure. And pressure, usually the difference, we would say, is that pressure is a short-term situation that we're under and we have to perform, whereas stress is something more enduring. So now we're both flipping and navigating between stress and pressure all of the time, and something will have to give at some point. So I think it's trying to really use this opportunity to you know, find where you can those measures of care that enable you to protect and take care of yourself, so you're in the best possible position for the future. And it's easier than said than done. I do realise that.
I'd like to see all nursery owners that I know taking next Friday off, VE Day. They would have done if they'd been at work. It would have been a bank holiday. It would be really nice if everyone sort of, left social media and either spent the day watching Netflix or in the garden or whatever it is that makes them happy, just to reset so that they can fire again on all cylinders the following week. But I'm definitely going to remember to practice that one. I've definitely got it out of my diary that day, Friday, no work. You've been training mental health first aid for quite some time now. What difference have you found that it's made to the staff that have been on the training themselves, to their colleagues at work and to their bosses?
I think the biggest thing that stands out for me is empathy. Quite often we're really good at sympathy. So we'll be like, oh, they're there. I'm sorry that's happening for you. But empathy is really about putting ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And when it comes to mental health, one of the the biggest trickiest thing is that we can't see how someone is feeling inside. Someone can present as though they are well together and they've got and everything is well for that person, but we never really know what is going on beneath the surface. We never know what is going on behind closed doors. And empathy is the single biggest thing that can support us in supporting other people. And I think just when we deliver the courses and we explore depression and anxiety, just as an example, and we explore just how debilitating those illnesses can be on somebody, and just how overwhelming and what an impact they make on somebody. I think it can be overwhelming, but I think it brings home that actually it can happen to any single one of us if we don't take proper care of ourselves. And so that empathy, that ability to be able to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, we can't know what it's like to experience depression or anxiety if we haven't experienced it ourselves. But if someone's telling us they're in pain, that they're suffering, we want to help, we want to be able to do something. But what I've found is that sometimes, because of our nature in this profession as caregivers, we want to fix problems, we want to provide a solution. And I don't know about you, but there's nothing worse than unwanted advice.
Mm-hmm.
If someone tries to solve your problem and give you unnecessary advice, you feel patronised, it doesn't feel genuine, but yet we all try to do it because we just want to be helpful. What these courses do is they really be able to support you to just listen. You don't have to fix, you don't have to provide solutions, you don't have to have any of the answers, you just need to care. And so being able to also provide people with the tools and the information to be able to spot signs when someone's health is declining, knowing how to sit and listen to those conversations, it's really, really helpful because it gives us confidence to be able to ask those difficult questions. And sometimes the biggest challenge I find with managers is that they are worried about offending someone, because when it comes to mental health, we feel like we need to be an expert, but yet we don't need to be an expert. We just need to care. So if we have more confidence and more knowledge, then we can ask those difficult questions, and that puts us in the best place to support somebody. And I think that's one of the,
it sounds absolutely spot on, because I think what we've all lost over the last since the rise of technology has been that confidence, having one-to-one conversations. And you see it with people who are entering the job market now, the sort of 18 to 21 year olds who've always known the internet, who've always known the ability to text and to send a message, and the idea of speaking to somebody, they're worried that they're going to say something wrong, and they don't say anything at all, they don't necessarily make it right. And you can't give support to somebody all the time by just texting and emailing somebody. Sometimes the best thing that they need is a face-to-face. So it's really been lovely to hear that you've equipped these people with skills that they can use in other areas, as well as helping people and colleagues with their mental health. It will stand them in good stead as human beings as well.
Yeah, that's it.
What do you think the future workforce will look like when we do reopen? Do you think it will be different?
One of the things, and I've already mentioned it about, we'll remember how we were treated, taken care of, thought about, respected. One of the things that I really hope it will do, and I'm seeing some of it happen now, it will empower us in terms of you know, why we work where we do, why we have the staff team in the way that we do. So I'm having conversations with owners who are saying, you know, obviously they've had lots of families give notice and leave. So we're expecting that maybe when the time is right to reopen, whatever that's going to look like, that we may have significantly smaller numbers of children and families, that maybe our staff might be smaller too. And so, yeah, a lot of it is kind of trying to plan for things that we're not quite sure of yet, but it's also trying to put those measures in place to make sure we're in the best kind of possible position moving forward. And I think, you know, empowering us to value, which is something I think in early years I discover that there tends to be, quite sadly, quite a low sense of self-esteem within the workforce. And there could be all sorts of different reasons for that. But really empowering our workforce to know what their skills and strengths and talents are, and be proud of the fact we're not very good as a country, are we, to own what we're good at. You know, if someone seems too confident or too self-assured, or seems like, you know, they're a bit of a show-off, straight away we don't necessarily like that. Yeah. We really need to use this time to think about, okay, so if this setting and these owners, this organisation that I work for has treated me really well, I can't wait to get back there and put all my experience and knowledge back into the children and families, support my team, and how we're going to grow through this situation. Likewise, I think for some people it might think, actually, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this is the setting for me, and what do I want to do moving forward. So I think for lots of it's going to change our thought processes in lots of different ways.
Yeah. Are you going to volunteer to homeschool your children after this?
Well, my daughter is 14, so
you're going to take on GCSEs for your daughter and homeschool? No. But
I've got to say, she is delightful. I lucked out really, because she gets on with everything. You know, don't get me wrong, we have our moments, but she gets on with everything. She's been fantastic. So
is she really motivated to do her work that she's been set?
I wouldn't go as far as saying motivated. And I think as the time has gone on, it's changed how we feel. So, you know, the first couple of weeks it was up by 9, breakfast, curtains open, bed made, get dressed. And now, you know, as long as we're up sometime before midday, we've logged on and done something, that's a good day. So
yeah, no, exactly. But I think you're right. I think some people who work in early years may well choose to homeschool their children, because they've actually decided they're actually quite good at it, and that will be obviously less people returning to the workforce, and a shock for some employers. But also I think some parents might choose to homeschool their children, and therefore they may not start to use childcare again in the future. We've proved something that we didn't think we could do, that we can actually do, and I think it will increase the number of people who are homeschooled in the UK moving forward, whereas I think it was relatively a small number. I think it will grow and it will become a larger number in the future, which will be one of the things we have to manage, really.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Do you think it's going to make a difference to recruitment and retention? I mean, you talked a lot about how the way people have been made to feel is going to make them feel differently, perhaps, about going back to work, and the way they've been treated. So should we see that the difference is that people who've been looked after will want to return, and those who haven't perhaps are looking for other jobs?
I think recruitment and retention is tricky in early years at the best of times. You know, we are experiencing real issues in recruitment. You know, because generally we are a female dominated workforce. I don't know, for myself, by the time it came to having my own daughter and going back to work, it didn't make sense financially for me to go back to work in the role that I was doing at that time and pay for my daughter to go there. So I think by the time usually women are having their own children, they're making different choices about where to work, and that obviously impacts on our workforce, unfortunately. So it's going to be a tricky time. It's going to be a time of rebuilding. It's going to be a time of re-establishing at careers, but also businesses. So it's a really tricky one, I think that is. I think only time will tell. And I think, you know, a lot of times we worry about the future, don't we? And we're worrying about what it's going to look like. And until we get there, I think we just have to take one day
day to day, week to week now, aren't we? We're much more so.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of talk about, obviously, employees in the age group 18 to 24 feeling more anxious now. And there was a recent survey, I think it was Sky News and YouGov, and 50% of 18 to 24-year-olds said that they felt anxious. When people get asked to be unfurloughed and to return to work, people are going to undoubtedly have concerns about coming back to work. What could owners do to support employees who were suddenly anxious and newly suffering from anxiety when it comes to returning to work?
So one of the things that I talk about a lot are I can get my words out, employee assistance programs. We're seeing more and more nursery settings using EAPs to be able to support their employees. But I know from past experience that the organisation that I worked for, although we had an EAP, it was never really advocated or shared or talked about properly with us as a team. So when I was experiencing mental health issues, I didn't utilise that support that was available to me because it was never really widely spoken about. And so I really encourage those settings that have EAPs already in place, share it with staff, let them know that there might be free counselling sessions available, that there might be a support line, that there might be all sorts of tools that they can use confidentially and that are going to be able, that will support them at this current time, because I think that's something really important to advocate. And the other thing, we talked about it earlier about how we're checking in with one another, whether that's through a Zoom call or a conversation. But one of the things that I think are especially helpful are wellness action plans. So
right.
Mind have developed their own, which they call wellness action plans, but also the original wellness action plan was called WAPS by Mary Ann Copeland. Yeah. So what they're really good at, I think, at the moment is it's not extra workload and burden for the managers and leaders. It's sharing what they are with your team. A wellness action plan is really about that self-awareness. So what do I need as a person to support my well-being? How can I take care of myself? What am I worried about? And you don't necessarily have to even share that with anyone. But if you complete it and you can see actually there are things on there that are causing you some worry and you might need some support from your line manager, then when you're looking at how you're going to return to work, whatever that might look like, if you've been furloughed or however that might be, it is what are the staff going to need from you moving forward. So just in the same way, we're going to have to take really great care with supporting and young children's transitions back into nursery. It's also taking some real time care and attention into support staff to come back to work, really, because I'm self-employed and I'm worrying about going to work when the time comes, what that's going to be like, because I haven't done it for such a long time. At the moment I'm perfectly safe in my house, but I'm worrying about the future, and that's where anxiety generally tends to come from. It's worrying about things that haven't happened yet, that might be happening, or it's worries about maybe something I said or how I was treated. And so all of these things, if we allow them to kind of take over, can really cause some health issues. So I think having that time to check in with yourself, it's really, really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked earlier, didn't we, about this idea that, people would need to reboard people who've previously, not had such a long time off, perhaps, and since they last had any maternity leave or adoption leave or something similar, long-term sickness. We've got to think about how we get people and reintegrate them, retransition them back into their rooms and into their departments. It's not going to be easy for anybody. And if we understand that it's not going to be easy, that tends to make us do a better job of the effort we put into helping people to return to work and get back up to speed, if that's what we need them to be. How can my listeners find out more about your work, Kate, and find out how to join your world? So you can find me on Facebook. I'm Kate Moxley Wellness for All.
I've actually today launched a Wellbeing Toolkit with an online training platform, so to be able to support people at this time. So all sorts of different resources that people can access. And I've also on my website put a lot of free resources to support you through this coronavirus circumstance that we're trying to find and support our way through. So lots of different ways that you can connect with me, and I'm always happy to hear from people. I'm at home at the moment, so however I can add value or support someone with my time, my words, my presence, then I'm more than happy to do that if people want to reach out.
Great. Well, I'll make sure that I pop the logo, pop the links below this, and make sure that people can find you. And obviously when we share our little recording, I'll make sure that the people can find you as well. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Jolly good. Right, well, we'll stop recording. Stop recording. Did you want to stop cloud recording? Yes, I did. Put the